Hello, everyone. It's Blair Space here, and now I'm gonna be real with you. I wasn't originally going to make this video, but one thing I saw that changed my mind was a guide on Godzilla 2021 made by Tricky Godzilla, and I thought, well, hey, why don't I try that? You know, some people have asked that, some friends have made suggestions for it, and I decided, you know what? It's a good idea. So, we're gonna start off. I'm gonna get straight into it. We're gonna start with the basics. What do all the moves do? And I'm gonna say it now. Everything here has use, like high value. Except for the roars, but you get the idea. So we're gonna learn the controls here. One is Turbo Strike, does 695 damage, costs about 13 or so charge. The hitbox covers from top to bottom. Like here, let me imagine this. Starts here, goes there, goes down here, there, all around Mecha. It's a pretty solid hitbox. And if I'm correct, it has like a 5-second cooldown. And yeah, there's also a delay to the hitbox. Like, let me make a demonstration here. Walk into this. Okay, it's waited a little bit too long there. See that? There's a bit of a delay, so you can take advantage of that. Next is Invigorated Kick, which has a 6-second cooldown, costs 20 charge, does a total of like 700 or so damage. Over 10 ticks. It has insane range all around. As you can see. If I'm correct though, it has extra range near the front, or so. Next is Surgical Stab 3. But the funny part is, the hitbox is active as long as it's curved, like here. Let me go in here. Basically, what you can try to do, like down to the actual nanosecond, like here. Like even during that last second where it was like just barely curved, it was active. Like, it's not until it's completely straight that it's inactive. So in a way, you can kind of try and range people with it as an actual tail whip. Kind of difficult, but it's not impossible. Next is Proton Scream. This has a 40-second... Oh, by the way, Surgical Stab has, I believe, a 6-second-ish cooldown. And costs 15 charge. Next, we have Proton Scream, 40-second cooldown, costs 60 charge, and does 3,000 damage over 6 seconds, which is 500 damage per second. It has a 2-second startup and like a 2-second end lag delay, so bear in mind of when you use it. And finally, we have Creeping Salvo, which does 830 damage or so, I believe. I could double check, but I'll probably make a comment on it. But has if I'm correct, a 12-second cooldown, costs 25 charge, and the range is insane. Look at that. All of that. And then finally, the dash. And we all know about the dash. If I remember correctly, it has like an 8-second cooldown and can bring you forward about this far. And finally, one thing that is not part of KU, but more so something you just want in general. First, you go to settings, and then you want... Well, okay, KU has this by default, but Shift Lock Switch, set by developer. Now basically, this is for PC users. I believe mobile players have this, but I believe for them it's a bit wonky. So if you're mobile, I do apologize. This is not helpful for you. But basically, go to the left side of your keyboard, or at least for my keyboard's left side, and hit Control. This is a key factor. So what you can do is you can do dash, make sure you turn so your tail isn't vulnerable, or whatever, or just in general. Because being able to, just using Control Shift in general makes combat 10 times easier, except in the water. I would not use it in the water. It's a bit wonky in there. This allows you to turn while you're doing dash, and it allows you to get a better eyes view. Yeah, it's better to do this in general, because that way you can also do things like this. Instead of, like, let's say, you could control your turns, unlike this where it's like, where you're kind of shaking your mouse trying to do it. But now that we got into the first part, let's move on to combining these controls, and, you know, we're going to go into stage 2. Okay, we're now in stage 2, and here we're going to cover the, you know, basics of combining the, you know, the keys and all that. So, first thing that you want to do is learn how to combine dash with your other moves. For example, the very basic one that everyone probably knows already, dash and turbo strike. Bear in mind, the turbo strike covers your center mass except for your tail. So what you can do is you can essentially launch yourself at people. You can also do this if you're in a hurry trying to get through buildings. You can try to dash through it, at least destroy any small or damaged buildings in your way. So yeah, very basic, and I'm sure many people know this. Now the next one is dash and invigorated kick. Now, this one's a little bit more complicated, but what you have to do is you have to quickly stop sprinting and then hit 2 and V at the same time. Like, let me make an example. Bear in mind, however, the hit radius of the invigorated kick is wherever you activate the kick, or basically at the start of your dash. So I suggest doing this to either bait out targets, or maybe do like a side sweep. Let's say there's a G21 right in front of me charging me, right? He's trying to charge me head on like a dingus. I do this, and he'll run into the AoE. Or let's say we have a smarter one, like a smarter G21. Like, you know, we're trying to do our little ranging stuff. And instead of going backwards, I'll do like this. Well, okay, that's a bad example. But you know what I mean. I'll dash, I'll do invigorated kick to the side, and some of the AoE will at least scrape them and deny them of regen. Yeah. Because the whole idea of Mechagodzilla 2021 is that you can whittle down people without even having to get into physical contact with them. But on a side tangent, we also have the very basic turbo strike and surgical stab. I'd say are the most reliable combo. I say not to use invigorated kick because that's AoE and that's damage over multiple ticks. Meanwhile, these are just standard melee, so it's like the damage is instant. You get your maximum damage in that very moment. Surgical stab does 755 damage. Combine that with turbo strike, it's 1,450 damage per combo with those things. Pretty devastating. That being said, you can also combine surgical stab with dash. Now this I rarely do because it's basically the same as combining invigorated kick and dash, but you have to be a lot more precise by the nanosecond. For me, it's just way too tedious, especially when invigorated kick is equally as effective. Like, I can try it right here. Hold on. Hey, there we go. That's a pretty good example. In the heat of the moment, I don't know if I'd be able to pull that off, though. I don't know. I could practice with it more. I could try. But, yeah. Next is Proton Scream. This one, I recommend either A, going for a target that's running away that's very low, a target that can't escape, like who's out in the open, or doing it on a target that is already, you know, in the process of firing off their beam, because then you can punish them. Because like I said, this thing does insane damage. But because of the charge up, you want to use it when your opponent is either exposed and unable to avoid it, or is in the middle of doing their own beam, which means that they're out of position by default because they want to hit you. So they have to either A, trade a beam exchange with you, which for them is just bad, or just hide behind cover and just waste their beam. Either way, it's good in your favor. And finally, this one's another fairly basic one, but dash and creeping salvo. Very straightforward. I'd say this is pretty important when you're chasing targets or doing a 1v1 against another mecha. If you can try and bait out their dash, you could probably counter dash and then use creeping salvo to punish them. Yeah. And next, now that we got, the basic combos and all that, we can go over some strategies against, certain types of kaiju. Okay, last part. Phase 3. I would say for this, we're going to cover ground kaiju first because that is, granted, although Mechagodzilla is very dominant in, is dominant in many different terrains, he's most dominant on land for combat. Now, for large targets who can't really evade you very well or out in the open, very basic strategy. Creeping salvo, proton scream, and once your proton scream ends, you can go for another creeping salvo. This is definitely effective against things like G14s, behemoths, shins, G21s, anything that's big and won't have time to get behind cover very effectively. Against faster targets, I suggest you just keep applying pressure. You don't have to use your beam, but realistically speaking, you have 29 sprint and a dash that it gives you an insane boost. You can cut corners, for example. You can, again, doing the turbo strike, you can go through terrain, or at least you can break through, damaged buildings or small buildings to cut them off. And creeping salvo combined with dash can definitely give a running kaiju, like a fast running kaiju, a run for their money. And even if you're not attacking, you just running after them and dashing, you're applying enough pressure that if they try to counterattack, they're gonna get punished by your creeping missile, the creeping salvo or whatever. And many fast ground kaiju don't have much health. So any bit of damage from this thing that's like 830 or 820 damage, it's gonna be a heavy punish for them. They either have to keep running until you eventually, cut them off and catch them, or, they have to attack you and then get punished anyway. Against small kaiju, pretty straightforward. Turbo Punch covers your entire, main body, so if you're on top of them, you can do that. Surgical Stab is similar, except it covers, I believe, it was like your torso all the way to down here. So you can combo that against small kaiju. But really, Invigorated Kick. Invigorated Kick is just the best go-to for small, nimble kaijus that are trying to be, what are you gonna do? You can't hit me. But, because I think one thing I need to mention is that Invigorated Kick not only has a wide, spread area, but, here, let me dash over here and make an example. It also has really good range going down and up. For example, upwards, it has range goes up to here-ish, and it goes all the way to down here as well. It's basically like a short-budget thermo pulse. So you can have cases like this where someone's trying to run away, and you can do this, and they think they're slick hiding under the bridge. No, they're not. And just in general, you can use that on small kaiju. So yeah, that's another thing on Invigorated Kick. I probably should add that in Phase 2, but honestly, it's fine. So next, we're going to cover Swimming Kaiju. This one's pretty straightforward, actually. For those who have experience of flying kaiju, you might already know this, or at least you might find this useful, but you can do a reverse swim, similar to a reverse fly in the water. So what you can do as mecha, if you're chasing someone or fighting someone, creeping salvo, you back up so they can't melee punish you. Then you go in for Turbo Strike. I will give a heads up that Turbo Strike's hitbox is a bit worse in the water, but as long as you're on top of them, you should be okay. But even then, you have a 90 swim speed, which is really good, so you can pursue targets and use creeping salvo. Like, he's good in the water, too. He's not the best at fighting in the water, but he's damn good. Like, he's high up there. And finally, we're going to cover the one that I'm sure everyone wants to know the most. How do you fight flying kaiju? Well, this is going to sound very basic and straightforward, but just time your attacks. Like, for example, let's say I'm fighting a Showa King Ghidorah. It all depends on what move they use and what move you use, and your timing. You have to have good timing, and you have to be good at predicting their moves. For example, a Showa King Ghidorah comes up to me. He decides to be a little prick and just hover up here, right? And uses, like, you know, Typhoon attack. Well, the range of my Vigorous Kick can actually reach him up there if he's feeling bold. So, there's that. If he goes for, like, a normal, like a kick, his kick or whatever, or his bite, I can do Turbo Strike. If he tries to, like, quickly fly by, if I have a good opening, I can just hit him a Creeping Salvo. Or, hey, I could bait out his attacks and do this. Now, granted, against flyers is a bit more difficult because they're faster, but it is possible. So, don't mark that off as not doable. And finally, what if he beams you? Well, that's simple. You save your beam. For the love of God, do not use it unless only under two. You only use it under two circumstances. One, they're very low in health. Like, let's say 100 or 200 or maybe 300 HP. So you can quickly finish them off so they don't run away or whatever, or cheese you. Or B, when they beam. So let's say the Showa King Ghidorah is half health. After I managed to punish him fair enough, I hear him go, or whatever, you know, my horrible impression of the BDDD. And then I counter beam. And because he's half health, which half health for Showa King Ghidorah is 1,500, my beam does up to 3,000 damage. That's gonna hurt him. He's gonna be forced to beam drop, and odds are, against flyers just in general, make sure you're inland. Because if they beam drop, you want them to land on the ground. Like, let's say the Showa King Ghidorah is out here, he beam drops, well, he's in the water, and that's gonna make it harder for me. But if he beam drops, like, let's say here, like above this hill, he lands on a hill, and I can still keep beaming him and, you know, walk up to him. Or, you know what I mean? Against the heavyweight flyers, like King Ghidorah, Mecha King Ghidorah, whatever, Titanus Rodan, it's pretty similar. The difference is that they're bulkier, but they're easier to hit. They're harder to deal with, I will say that, but they're not impossible. Like, for example, against King Ghidorah, like Heisei King Ghidorah and Mecha King Ghidorah, I'd say that's like a 50-50 chance of you winning or losing. It depends if you play your cards right. It's a very similar strategy to, you know, fighting a, you know, Showa King Ghidorah, but has more health, more melee damage, and less speed. You know, pretty straightforward. Now, against the ones that people really have trouble with, Monster Zero, Mogira, and Destroya. I'm going to be straight up honest with you. Against Destroya and Mogira, you can't fight them. Destroya has way too much health and way too much melee damage. Hello, Aaron, by the way. I see you joined. It also has two beams, which one doesn't require charge and be used right after the other. Like, Destroy can just delete your health. I need to close this. Sorry if I don't say hi. He just deletes your health with both beams. Like, I'm sorry. He is the one thing that's an instant checkmate. Mogira is just Sky Camp Central. It will Sky Camp you. Because its beams are burst damage, it's hard to punish. If it goes for melee, you can punish it. I'd say at best, you can do a good amount of damage to it if it goes for melee. What you could do to irritate it is just go swim, go under Promethea Tunnel. If it goes for a beam, you can punish it with Creeping Salvo or Proton Scream. But it's not a reliable strategy. That, and quite frankly, all you're doing is just being annoying. You're not really threatening it, because if it's smart, it's going to be like, well, this is a waste of time, and it's just not going to bother. You could say that for any flyer, to be honest. And for Monster Zero, what you want to do, the main thing, they're going to try and range you. A smart one is going to try and range you with its bite, and the less smart ones are just going to try and face tank you and fly straight at you. Regardless, you want to keep backing up and try to bait them to going down enough so you can hit them with creeping salvo. And then, if you want, you can try and let them charge into you. Again, you can preemptively just use Turbo Strike and Surgical Stab to try and trade hits with them. The key is landing the creeping salvo, and Monster Zero's beam is crap, and its wings block its view, so if it beams, well, it's probably dumb, so you could punch it with your own beam. Like, you have a chance of beating Monster Zero. I'd say the only two flyers you probably have no chance at beating is just Mogira and Destroya. Monster Zero will give you a bit of trouble. Anything else could be either 50-50 or a pretty easy win, depending how skilled you are. It's really not too terrible. Even if they can be annoying. They can be annoying, but they can't be, you know what I mean? There's a difference between an opponent being difficult and an opponent being impossible to beat. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope I taught you some important things about, doing fighting Mechagodzilla, or just in general, just, fighting flyers or whatever. By the way, this is my friend. Yeah, that's it.